When I booked that Airbnb in Portland, I wasn't expecting anything dramatic. I just needed a break from my job, from my noisy apartment, from people in general. I work in graphic design, which means I spend most of my days staring at screens, answering Slack messages, and trying not to lose my mind during endless Zoom calls. I thought a solo weekend in a quiet place would help me reset. The Airbnb listing looked perfect, modern hideaway with forest views. The photos showed sunlight filtering through big windows, soft blankets draped over a tan leather couch, and a little wooden deck surrounded by trees. The host, a guy named Eric, had over 400 glowing reviews, all 5 stars. People called him friendly, helpful, professional. The kind of guy who leaves fresh muffins and handwritten welcome notes. I booked it instantly. When I pulled into the driveway that Friday evening, everything looked exactly like the photos, maybe even better. The house sat on a small hill, partly hidden by tall fir trees, with string lights twinkling over the porch. Inside, it was spotless. There was a faint smell of vanilla candles, and gentle acoustic music played through a speaker by the counter. I remember thinking it felt too perfect, like one of those model homes no one actually lives in. I texted my best friend, Maya. I swear this looks like a Pinterest dream cabin. If I disappear, at least I died in style. She replied with a laughing emoji and said, "You and your creepy imagination." I laughed too. But looking back, maybe I should have listened to that gut feeling. The first night was fine. Peaceful even. I cooked pasta, opened a bottle of wine, and sat by the window watching the trees move in the wind. I fell asleep easily, which almost never happens. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and did some work at the kitchen table. Everything still felt normal until I noticed something odd. Above the TV, there was a small, round black dot on the ceiling. It looked like a camera lens, but I brushed it off, telling myself it was probably a motion sensor or part of the smoke detector. Airbnb allows security cameras in common areas, so I didn't think much of it. Still, I made a mental note to check it later. That evening, I took a shower, put on a robe, and sat on the bed scrolling through my phone. I noticed a tiny red glint in the corner of the room, barely visible, but there. It was like a pinpoint of light coming from the bookshelf. I squinted, thinking maybe it was a reflection, but when I moved, the red light moved too. My heart skipped. I got up slowly and walked toward it, half telling myself it was nothing, half terrified of what I might find. When I got closer, I saw a small hole drilled into the spine of a fake book. The title was something generic like The Art of Minimalism, but when I touched it, it felt heavier than a normal book. I pulled it off the shelf and opened it and froze. Inside was a tiny black device, wired into the back cover. A camera. I actually dropped it out of shock. My hands started shaking immediately. I felt this cold, crawling feeling on the back of my neck, like I'd been watched for days without knowing it. I picked up my phone and started recording everything: close-ups, angles, timestamps. I needed proof. I unplugged the camera and set it on the kitchen counter, staring at it like it was alive. I couldn't stop thinking about all the moments it might have seen: the shower, me changing clothes, sleeping. The idea made me nauseous. I messaged Eric through the Airbnb app. My text was short and angry. "Why is there a hidden camera in the bedroom?" He replied almost instantly. "Oh wow, that's strange," he wrote. "There shouldn't be anything like that. Maybe it's part of the old alarm system. Don't worry, I'll check it out tomorrow morning." His tone was too casual, like this wasn't a big deal at all. That made it worse. I couldn't tell if he was pretending or genuinely didn't care. Either way, I didn't trust him. I unplugged everything else that could possibly record: smart speaker, router, even the TV. Then I sat in bed with every light on, my phone flashlight pointed at the door. I barely slept that night. Every creak made me jump. At one point, I heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate ones on the porch. I held my breath, too scared to move. After a few minutes, they stopped. I wanted to call the police, but I convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe it was nothing. Around 3 a.m., I finally dozed off, still clutching my phone. The next morning, just as the sun started rising, I heard a knock at the door. It was Eric. He was smiling, holding a coffee cup like he was just being friendly. "Morning," he said. "Mind if I come in and take a look at that device?" His calmness freaked me out even more. I told him to wait outside while I got it. He hesitated for a second, his smile twitching, then said, "Sure, of course." When I handed him the camera, he examined it for a moment, turning it over in his hand. Then he laughed lightly and said, "Oh, this? Yeah, that's definitely part of the old alarm system. Totally harmless." His tone was rehearsed. Too confident. I could feel my stomach twist. I told him I'd already looked it up online. The model number matched a Wi-Fi spy camera, one that could stream live video to any device connected to the internet. The moment I said that, his expression changed. The friendliness disappeared from his face completely. "You shouldn't believe everything you read online," he said quietly, then added, "If you're uncomfortable, you can check out early. But I can't issue a refund since your stay's already started." Something in his eyes was off. Cold. Calculated. It didn't feel like a misunderstanding anymore. It felt like a warning. I told him I was leaving anyway. He didn't argue. He just gave me a small nod, said, "Suit yourself," and walked back to his car. But before he drove off, he turned his head slightly and looked at the house through the window at me. The look wasn't friendly. It wasn't even curious. It was like he was watching to see what I'd do next. I waited until his car disappeared down the dirt road before I started packing. As I threw my things into my bag, I noticed something else. A circular mirror above the dresser, small and decorative, almost like an accent piece. But something about it seemed off. It didn't reflect the room correctly. I got closer, heart hammering, and reached out to touch the glass. My fingers pressed against it, and the reflection didn't match. That's when I realized the truth. It wasn't a mirror. It was another camera. I stood there staring at the fake mirror, my reflection warped and distorted in the glass. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My breath came out shaky as I slowly pried the mirror from the wall. It came off easier than it should have, revealing a small square cavity behind it. Inside was another black device, smaller than the first, but unmistakably a camera. A single wire snaked into the wall, disappearing behind the drywall. I felt dizzy. I dropped the mirror, stumbled backward, and almost tripped over my suitcase. My hands were trembling as I grabbed my phone and started recording again, narrating every detail just to keep my mind focused. I said the date, the time, described what I'd found, and filmed the wiring inside the wall. It felt surreal, like I was trapped inside one of those true crime documentaries I always watched before bed. I wanted to get out of there immediately, but some stubborn part of me wanted evidence. Proof that this wasn't just me being paranoid. I searched the room again, inside lamps, inside picture frames, even under the nightstand. That's when I found the third camera. It was embedded in the ceiling vent, almost perfectly hidden behind the metal grate. I felt a wave of nausea. How many times had I changed clothes, undressed, or simply existed here under their watch? I grabbed my bag and bolted out of the house without looking back. I got in my car and drove for 10 minutes before I finally pulled over into a gas station parking lot. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, trying to slow my breathing. I felt sick, disgusted, violated. I called the police first, but the dispatcher said since it was a rental property issue, they'd send someone to take a report, but couldn't promise much right away. Then I called Airbnb. After a long hold, a calm woman answered, her voice almost too soft, like she'd practiced empathy but not understanding. I told her everything about the cameras, about the host showing up unannounced, about how unsafe I felt. She said she was so sorry to hear that and would escalate it to the trust and safety team. I asked her what that meant. She said they'd review it and follow up. I wanted to scream. I'd just discovered someone had been recording me in a bedroom, and all she could promise was a review. She did offer me a refund, though, and a voucher for a future stay. That line almost made me laugh. It was so absurd. I told her to delete my account when this was over. While I waited for the police, I scrolled through Eric's Airbnb profile again. Everything still looked normal. Hundreds of 5-star reviews, cheerful comments about his great hospitality. But as I read them closer, I noticed something odd. Most of the reviews came from accounts with no profile pictures, and all the names sounded generic. John D. Emma K. Traveler 89. A few mentioned how clean and private the place was, using the same exact phrasing, word for word. It was too consistent, too polished. It didn't feel real. Then I checked the photo section again and noticed one detail I hadn't before. In one of the older listing photos, maybe a year old, the same mirror I'd just ripped off the wall was visible. But it was in a different position, slightly tilted, aimed directly toward the bed. That was the moment my stomach dropped. That camera wasn't new. It had been there for a long time. When the police finally arrived, the officer, a woman named Detective Ruiz, took my report seriously. She looked through my photos and videos and said I'd done the right thing documenting everything. She told me not to go back to the house, that they'd contact Airbnb to get access to the property. She even asked if I was willing to give a formal statement later that week. I said yes, of course. But before she left, she said something that made my blood run cold. "You're not the first person to report something like this in the area." I asked her what she meant, but she just said, "There's an ongoing investigation." I can't say more right now. I sat there in my car, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process that sentence. Not the first person. That meant others had found cameras too. How many? How long had this been happening? And who was behind it? I went back to my motel that night, exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like someone watching me. Around 11 p.m., I got a notification on my phone and email from Airbnb. The subject line read, "Resolution Update." The message said the listing had been temporarily suspended pending investigation. That should have made me feel better, but something felt off. I went back to the Airbnb app to check, but when I searched for the listing, it was gone. Completely deleted. Eric's profile, too. Like it had never existed. I sat there staring at my screen, numb. I checked my call log. I checked my photos. And that's when I noticed something that made me freeze. The videos I'd recorded of the cameras, the proof I'd collected, were gone. Deleted. My hands started shaking again. I checked my recently deleted folder. Empty. I checked my cloud backup. Nothing. They weren't just deleted, they were wiped clean, as if they'd never been on my phone at all. My first thought was that I'd made some stupid mistake, that maybe I'd accidentally deleted them, but deep down I knew I hadn't. I'd locked my phone, kept it on me the whole time. So how did they disappear? I felt my chest tighten. I turned off my phone and sat in silence, staring at the dark screen, terrified to turn it back on. That's when my motel room phone rang. I jumped. It was one of those old landlines by the bed, the kind no one uses anymore. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. There was silence on the other end. Then, finally, a low, calm voice said, "You shouldn't have taken anything from the house." My blood ran cold. Before I could say anything, the line went dead. For a long moment, I just stood there frozen, staring at the phone in my hand. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. I felt sick. My first instinct was to convince myself it was some kind of prank or a wrong number. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. No one had this number. I'd checked in just a few hours earlier, paid in cash, and hadn't even given it to Airbnb since the police had told me not to. Whoever called me knew exactly where I was. My throat went dry. I grabbed my phone, but I hesitated to turn it back on. What if it was being tracked? What if they could see me through the camera? I ended up wrapping it in a towel and shoving it in the drawer. I paced the room for a while, trying to think rationally, but my thoughts were spiraling. Every creak in the motel made me jump. Finally, I forced myself to move. I packed my things, shoved them in the trunk, and left before midnight, driving aimlessly down the empty highway. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to put distance between me and that house, and now, apparently, whoever was watching me. I ended up pulling over in a diner parking lot on the outskirts of town. It was one of those 24-hour places that smelled like burnt coffee and fried food, but it felt safe. I sat in a corner booth with my laptop open, connected to the free Wi-Fi, and created a new email account. From there, I logged into Airbnb using a different name. I wanted to see if Eric had other listings under another profile. It took hours, but I found something strange. A new host had just listed a property only 10 miles away. The photos looked familiar, the same furniture, same string lights, even the same couch with the same small tear on the armrest. The host's name was different, though. Daniel. His profile picture was new, too, a blurry photo of some guy in sunglasses. But the description? The wording was identical. Modern hideaway with forest views. My skin prickled. They'd deleted Eric's account and just re-uploaded the same listing under a new name. Like nothing had ever happened. I took screenshots of everything. I didn't even care if it got me flagged. I needed proof this wasn't some isolated mistake. I sent everything to Detective Ruiz's email, along with a short message. He's back under a different name. You need to see this. Then I booked a cheap hotel 3 towns over and tried to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. The next day, the detective called me back. Her tone was cautious. She said they'd gone to the property that morning, but it was already empty. No sign of the host, she said. But we did find what appears to be surveillance wiring inside multiple walls. Multiple walls. My stomach twisted. I asked if they'd found the cameras. She said yes, 6 of them total. But the strange part was, none of them contained SD cards. They'd all been wiped or were streaming live to another source. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing, she said. We're working with a cybercrimes unit to trace it. That should have been comforting, but it wasn't. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about one guy spying on guests for kicks. This felt organized. Intentional. I spent the next couple of days looking over Reddit threads, trying to find anyone else who'd gone through something similar. And that's when things got even stranger. I found 3 separate posts, different users, different cities, but all describing the same type of setup. Hidden cameras disguised as household items, all found in Airbnbs with unusually high ratings and perfect reviews. In each case, the host vanished right after being reported. No arrests, no follow-up, no accountability. It was like a cycle. Set up, get caught, disappear, repeat. And every single time, the listing was scrubbed clean within hours. I started piecing things together, making notes, connecting accounts by their photo similarities and writing patterns. And I realized something chilling. Many of the new hosts used profile names that matched the initials of old ones. ER became DR, different photo. Same style, same properties. It wasn't just one person. It was a network. Maybe even a business. I sent everything I'd found to Detective Ruiz again, and this time she called me almost immediately. Listen, she said quietly, I'm going to tell you something off the record. We've been investigating a ring that's been placing hidden cameras in short-term rentals across multiple states. They sell the footage online. We think the host you encountered is part of it. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Sell the footage online. I couldn't even process that. She told me to keep my location private for now, to avoid using my old Airbnb account, and to contact her directly if anyone tried to reach me. I thanked her, hung up, and sat on the edge of the bed shaking. A few minutes later, I heard a knock on my hotel door. I froze. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Another knock, this time louder. Housekeeping, a voice called. But I hadn't requested any. I walked slowly to the peephole, barely daring to look. A man was standing there, tall, dark baseball cap, holding a clipboard. No uniform. No cart. My blood ran cold. I backed away silently, grabbed my phone, and dialed the front desk. When the receptionist answered, I whispered, "Is housekeeping supposed to be outside my door right now?" There was a pause, then she said, "No, ma'am, not at this hour." When I looked back through the peephole, the man was gone. For the rest of that night, I didn't sleep. I sat against the wall with the lights off, staring at the door, my pulse thudding in my throat. Every few minutes, I checked the peephole again, half expecting the man in the cap to be standing there. He never came back, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was nearby, just waiting. When the sun finally rose, I grabbed my stuff, checked out early, and drove to a cafe across town. I needed to be around people. I sat in a corner booth by the window, ordered black coffee, and opened my laptop. My inbox had 2 new messages. One was from Detective Ruiz. We're tracing the IP addresses linked to the footage. Stay somewhere safe. Don't go back to your apartment yet. The other email didn't have a sender, just like the one before. The subject line read, "We warned you." I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. There was no text, no signature, just a single attachment. A photo. My stomach dropped when I saw what it was. It was me sitting in the Airbnb bedroom, wearing the same robe I'd had on that night. The timestamp in the corner was from 2 nights before I'd found the cameras. My hands went cold. I looked around the cafe, scanning faces, half expecting someone to be watching me from a corner. I closed the laptop, grabbed my things, and ran outside to my car. I couldn't even cry, my body was too numb for that. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe, but all I could see in my head was that photo me, caught in a moment I didn't even know was being filmed. The police hadn't mentioned anything about recovering footage, so where had this come from? And who sent it? That afternoon, I went straight to the police station. When I showed the email to Detective Ruiz, she looked alarmed but calm, like she'd expected this kind of thing. She said it was good I'd come in, then asked to make a copy of the email headers to trace the sender. "This looks like someone trying to scare you," she said. "But we're close. I promise you that." She told me they'd raided another short-term rental that morning in a nearby town and found the same setup: hidden cameras, Wi-Fi networks masked under random names, even evidence of live feeds being sold through encrypted sites. My skin crawled. "We believe it's the same group," she said quietly. "They're organized. They know how to disappear fast." Before I left the station, she gave me her card and said, "If you see or hear anything unusual, call me." No hesitation. That night, I checked into a different hotel under a fake name this time. I even turned my phone off and used cash. But still, I couldn't relax. Every time I looked around the room, I imagined cameras behind every vent and smoke detector. I ended up taking a flashlight and checking every corner before I could even sit down. I barely ate. I barely slept. Around 1 a.m., my laptop pinged. The Wi-Fi was connected, even though I hadn't turned it on. My hands shook as I looked at the screen. A notification appeared. A video file was being shared with me through an encrypted link. No sender, no subject. Just the file name. look_behind_you.mp4. My breath caught. I didn't click it. I couldn't. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it under the blanket like a child hiding from a monster. My chest felt like it was going to burst. After a minute, I forced myself to grab the laptop again and turn off the Wi-Fi. But even offline, the file was still there, downloaded somehow. I stared at it for a long time, every rational part of my brain screaming not to open it. But curiosity, terror, maybe won. I double-clicked. The video started in total darkness. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then a faint image appeared, grainy, shaky footage of a hotel hallway. My hotel hallway. The same patterned carpet, the same light fixtures. The camera was moving, like someone was walking slowly down the hall toward my room. I watched in horror as it stopped right in front of my door. My door. The screen flickered, and then black. I slammed the laptop shut again and nearly threw up. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't even grab my phone. When I finally managed to, I dialed Ruiz's number, whispering, "Someone's here." She told me to stay quiet, lock the door, and wait for patrol. I turned off the lights, backed into the bathroom, and crouched on the floor. Every sound in the room felt amplified: the hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, my own breathing. 10 minutes felt like an hour. Then I heard footsteps outside. Slow, heavy ones, stopping right outside my door. My whole body froze. I didn't dare make a sound. The footsteps stayed for what felt like forever, then faded away. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, the hallway was empty. The security cameras in the hotel showed nothing, no one matching that movement, no one near my door. Ruiz came to meet me in person. I showed her the video, but when she asked me to play it again, the file wouldn't open. It had vanished, just like the others before it. She stared at the blank screen, her expression tight. "They're watching your devices," she said. "We'll need to take everything: your phone, laptop, even your car's dash cam if you have one." I didn't even argue. She took them all, bagged them as evidence, and promised I'd get updates soon. That night, I checked into a police-approved safe house. It wasn't fancy, bare walls, no Wi-Fi, no smart devices, but for the first time in days, I felt a little safer. Or maybe just less exposed. I fell asleep just before dawn. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the curtains, and for a brief, blissful moment, I forgot everything. Until I looked at the nightstand. There was a folded piece of paper resting on top. My name was written on it in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. I picked it up with shaking hands and unfolded it. One sentence, written in black ink: "You can't hide from what's already online." I didn't move. I just stared at that note until the letters blurred. My name, written so neatly, like it wasn't a threat but a promise. My pulse roared in my ears. My first thought was that it had to be some mistake, that someone from the police had left it there by accident. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. My door had been locked. The only people who knew where I was supposed to be were the officers who'd placed me here and Detective Ruiz. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. I forced myself to breathe slowly, grabbed the note using a napkin so I wouldn't smudge any prints, and stepped back. I called Ruiz immediately. My voice was shaking so bad I could barely get the words out. She told me to stay put and not touch anything. She said she'd be there within 30 minutes. I hung up and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at that folded piece of paper. 30 minutes never felt longer in my life. Every creak of the house made me flinch. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting it to open on its own. Finally, I saw flashing lights outside. Relief washed over me when Ruiz stepped in with 2 uniformed officers. She took one look at the note and her face hardened. "We're moving you," she said. "Now." As we drove away, she explained that their investigation had confirmed what they'd suspected all along. It wasn't just a single host or even a small group, it was a full network. Dozens of fake Airbnb accounts, all connected to the same servers, rotating properties across states. The hidden cameras weren't random, they were part of a system designed to stream footage directly to encrypted forums and private buyers overseas. She said they'd traced some of the devices to shell companies registered under false names. "We've been following this ring for over a year," she said quietly. "You stumbled right into the middle of it." My stomach twisted. She told me they were preparing to make arrests soon, but the people involved were careful, and they had resources. "They knew who you were the second you found that camera," she added. That made me feel both seen and sick. She said they'd moved me to a temporary safe facility just outside the city, one that wasn't connected to any online databases. When we arrived, it looked like an ordinary suburban duplex. Nothing about it screamed police safe house. Inside, it was bare but secure. The locks were reinforced, the curtains thick. Ruiz handed me a burner phone and said she'd be in touch only through that number. Before she left, she added, "Don't go online. Don't log in anywhere. And don't tell anyone where you are." I nodded. I wanted to ask her something, why they hadn't shut down those accounts sooner, or how so many properties had gone unnoticed, but the words wouldn't come out. I just sat there, staring at the blank wall long after she left. That night, I lay awake in bed, replaying everything in my head: the cameras, Eric's blank smile, the fake listings, the video of my hotel door. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that red light blinking in the dark. Sometime after 2 a.m., the burner phone buzzed. My whole body tensed. It wasn't Ruiz. The number was unfamiliar. The message read, "We don't need your phone to find you." My throat went dry. I typed back one word, "Who?" but the message bounced. Number disconnected. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I turned it off completely and sat up, staring at the window. The street outside was quiet. But across the road, in the dark, I saw the faint glow of a phone screen, or maybe a camera lens. Just a small, flickering light. Then it blinked out. I barely slept after that. The next morning, Ruiz came by again, this time looking exhausted but determined. "We got them," she said. Mostly. They'd raided multiple locations across 3 states. Found dozens of cameras, computers, hard drives, hours and hours of hidden footage. My skin crawled just hearing her say it. She told me the group was selling live feeds under a paywall disguised as home security tutorials. thousands of subscribers, dozens of victims. You were one of the first to actually find a device and report it before it was wiped, she said. Your footage helped us build the case. I didn't feel heroic. I just felt hollow. I asked her what would happen to the videos that had been taken of me. She hesitated, then said, "We're trying to have them removed." But once something's online, her voice trailed off. I already knew what she meant. You can't erase everything. Not completely. A week later, I finally went back home. My apartment felt different now, smaller, darker. I couldn't relax the way I used to. I taped over my laptop camera, unplugged my Alexa, even covered the tiny light on my TV. Every click and buzz made me jump. But the worst part was knowing that somewhere out there, strangers had seen me without my consent, without my knowledge, and I'd never know who they were. A few days after returning home, I checked my mail. There was an unmarked envelope waiting in my box. My stomach dropped. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single printed photo, me, standing outside that same Airbnb the day I arrived, smiling, holding my bag. I hadn't sent that picture to anyone. At the bottom, in tiny type, were 4 words: "You were never alone." I called Ruiz immediately, but when she came to collect the envelope, she looked defeated. "We'll trace it," she said. But they always find ways to reach out, even from inside. That night, I sat in bed staring at the photo, wondering if I'd ever feel safe again. I thought about deleting all my accounts, throwing away my phone, disappearing somewhere off-grid. But then I realized no matter where I go, I'll always be looking over my shoulder. Because somewhere, in some forgotten corner of the internet, I'm still there. A face on a screen, a video on a loop, part of a nightmare that never really ends. And the worst part? Someone somewhere is still watching.